Welcome to the candidate forum for state senate. On the call tonight, we have Jay and Wiley, who are both running in Wake County. PTA is the nation's oldest child advocacy organization, responsible for things like hot school lunches, required immunizations for public school children, and child labor laws. The Wake County PTA is a 501c3 nonprofit, which means we cannot support candidates or political parties. We can, however, take positions on issues based on national PTA initiatives or voted on by our membership or board of directors. Today, our advocacy committee has invited each candidate listed with the Board of Elections on the ballot to participate in this forum. Some declined our invitation because of personal reasons or prior obligations. Other ones did not reply at all, even though we sent paper invitations to their home. Questions were submitted by the public and evaluated by a committee of over 20 people representing our community. If you'd be interested in joining the Wake PTA advocacy efforts, please find our contact information on wakepta.org. I will now turn things over to our moderator, Beth.
Hi. So we'll just go ahead and begin with opening statements. Since there's only two of us, I think could be around 2 minutes. We'll start with opening and then we'll move into question one and we'll just keep that order the same. So we will start with Jay.
Well, first of all, thank you, Beth, and thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Lisa, for hosting this tonight. And thank you for your leadership with the Wake PTA. I've appreciate the work that you all do as a parent of 2 children in Wake County Public Schools. But also, as I will mention in a minute, I've had the opportunity to work very closely with the Wake PTA on issues that are important to public education here in the General Assembly. My name is Jay Chaudhary. I serve as a member of the North Carolina State Senate. I represent Senate District 15, which runs from basically downtown Raleigh, part of downtown Raleigh, all the way up into northern Wake County. And this will be my 3rd term that I am running for election. I am a product of North Carolina Public Schools. I graduated from public schools in Fayetteville. And as I mentioned, I'm also the father of 2 children that are in Wake County Public Schools, one at Wiley Elementary School. My son is at Wiley and my daughter is at Ligon Middle School. And we have been incredibly impressed and thankful that we have such amazing public schools here in Wake County. I'm running for re-election for a number of reasons, but investing in public education and making sure that we have strong public schools has to be one of my top 3 priorities. And I think if this pandemic has taught us anything, I think it has laid bare the inequalities that we have both in our county, in our state, in our country. And we know that the single best way to move our citizens up the economic ladder is through public education. But what I will say is we have a lot of short-term needs that we have to address through public education right now, whether it was the thousands of laptops that the Wake County public school systems had to provide, setting up hotspots to make sure that kids had access to remote learning, the food insecurity that our kids and our families experienced. One thing that I think we've realized through the pandemic is just how comprehensive our services need to be when we're providing support to our families and our parents. And I'll conclude by saying this. When I was at the General Assembly during my first term, I believe, one of the things that came to my attention was the classroom mandate for K through 3, kindergarten through 3rd grade teachers that had a dramatic impact on teachers that were PE teachers, art teachers, and music teachers. And it was personally and emotionally very hard for me because at one point that classroom mandate actually resulted in many of these teachers potentially having to be laid off because the schools couldn't meet the mandate. And it was personally and emotionally very difficult for me to encounter my child's art teacher who came up to me in tears, telling me that she may get a pink slip and have to leave her job or be fired from her job. And as a result of that, I toured many elementary schools around Wake County to understand the impact of what the General Assembly was doing to these schools. And so I heard the frustrations from parents. I heard the frustration from kids, and I heard the frustration from teachers. And I spent almost a year advocating for relief for these K-3 schools because of what I had directly experienced as a parent. I mean, ultimately, we had some resolution around that issue, but what I would say is that the Wake PTA was a strong and important partner in that effort to make sure that the voices of parents in Wake County were heard, because they share the same goal, I think, that any parent does, is to make sure that our children have a world-class education. And so I'm excited to be here tonight. I think we can do really great things in 2021, especially with Senator Nickel here on the call, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. Wiley.
Thanks so much for having me. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. I am a former Obama White House staffer. I live in Cary. I'm a practicing attorney, and I'm in my first term in the state Senate. My district is Cary, Morrisville, and Northwest Raleigh. When I first got elected, I made a pledge to visit every single public school in my Senate district. I've got over 40 schools in the district. I had made it to 21 before the coronavirus pandemic hit. So haven't been able to finish that. It's just not safe to do it. But, you know, for me, that has been one of the most important things I've done is to go and visit, you know, PTA members, teachers, principals, students, you know, in the classroom to really learn how to be an effective state senator. And, you know, we have a simple choice in North Carolina. We can either continue to be the cheapest state in the country for tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy, or we can make long overdue and needed investments in public education. That means teacher pay. That means a school construction bond. It means doing all the things we need to do to make sure that we have the resources that our teachers need, especially during this coronavirus pandemic. You know, there's a lot of issues that I'm excited to talk about, but I wanted to just use this opportunity to talk about two bills that I've sponsored and am especially proud of. One was the K-3 Reading Improvement Act, to fully fund one TA in every classroom, K-2, and additional funding for third grade as well. I just believe our teachers and our students need to have a teacher and a full-time TA in every single classroom to get reading up to grade level. The Republicans have gutted the TA position in terms of funding and in terms of total positions. Lost close to 10,000 TA positions over the last several years. So that's a big priority for me. And then the issue, you know, that I got to see firsthand visiting schools was school nurses. We must have one full-time school nurse in every single school, period. You know, the federal recommended ratios are one nurse for every 750 students. You know, in Wake County, we're looking at one nurse for every roughly 1,750 students. You know, I in the 21 schools that I visited, I didn't meet a single nurse during any of those visits. You know, you ask students who their nurse is, and they'll say it's the receptionist at the front desk. You know, we've got to do much better. That must be a priority, especially during the coronavirus pandemic. If we're talking about having safe schools for our teachers and our students, having a nurse in every school is something that we've got to have. And just to give a shout out to Cynthia Ball, who represents parts of my district in Western Wake County. She filed the same version in the House. So working with her there, and you know, for me, it really is an honor and privilege to serve with Senator Jay Chaudhry. Our offices are right next to each other, and he is a terrific advocate for our students and for our schools.
Thank you. So we'll just keep, well, actually I said we would keep the order, but we'll go ahead and switch the order. We'll just follow Lisa's sheet. So we'll start with Wiley for question 1, and then we'll move to Jay. So the questions will be in the chat if you want to refer to them there, but I'll go ahead and read them as well. You guys kind of touched on this a little bit already. What is your assessment of how the state has handled the pandemic and distance learning?
You know, I mean, I think it's certainly been a challenge for everybody. You know, we ask so much of our teachers, and and we're asking so much of our parents right now. I think, the best thing I can say, is we sent out messages to my constituents about what their experiences, what they want for their schools several weeks ago. And, we had over 2,000 responses, and the overwhelming response was, we don't want to be back in school unless it's safe for our kids. So that is how my constituents feel. They want to have safe schools, but until we can do the things to make it safe, distance learning really is the best way to go to keep everybody safe. I know so many parents, certainly would love to have, full school resuming, but I think everyone has worked so hard to do the best they can, and it's just an ongoing process that we're all learning from every day.
Yeah. Jay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough question where I think they're all really bad choices, to be honest with you, because there are so many sides to that debate. But I would say, I think overall, I think the approach has been, I think it's been thoughtful. I think we have to give credit to the Wake County School Board in being thoughtful about the approach. I think that the approach that they have recommended has been, number one, to make sure that we look at children kind of under 10, K through 5 go first, because at least it looks like the science seems to indicate that there may be less of the chance or probability of getting infected, and then look at a hybrid model for middle school. I don't have a child in high school, but I was glad to see that they elected not to send high school students, at least initially, back. And I think they're going to have to just assess the situation on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, because I think one of the things that we have to take into consideration is if we have a second wave of the pandemic, how that's going to impact our decision in sending our kids back. I will also say that I think that it's a really personal decision for parents. And, as my wife and I debated how we were going to respond to both of our children, with our son, who is younger and is in elementary school. He's going back to a newly renovated elementary school that frankly has a lot of space. And we felt very comfortable with the leadership in that school to be able to send him back. But at Ligon Middle School, for example, that's a school that's sorely in need of renovation. That's another reason we need more renovation, and we need to pass school bonds to renovate the school. But I feel like each of those schools, I think, present different challenges for parents and how they decide to send their children back.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to question 2, and question 2 we'll start with Jay. So here's the question. It's been a little over 2 years since the nation's worst high school shooting happened in Parkland. How would you assess the progress in making schools safe, and what more should be done?
Yeah, so that's, it's a really good question. One of the things that I did right after the Parkland shooting, number one, let me say, I bring a background in school safety issues. When I served as special counsel to then Attorney General Roy Cooper, I led 2 of his task forces. The first one after the Columbine high school shooting in Colorado, and then secondly, the Virginia Tech task force that we had after the tragic shootings in Virginia Tech. So it's an area that I've spent several years in working for the Attorney General to try to tackle that issue. It was part of the reason that it spurred me to look at what we could do as a state to respond to the Parkland issue. And I would say a couple of things. I would say, number one, I was a primary sponsor of the Safer and Healthier School Kids Act, which was an act really modeled somewhat after the Florida legislation that was passed after the Parkland shooting took place, but that, it put in the extreme risk protection orders that could restrict firearms if that person presented a danger to a family or a friend. It was a bill that would require that would raise the age for the sale of firearms, and it would ban such things as bump stocks and trigger cranks. But it also, to Senator Nichols' point, I mean, it would put money towards funding nurses, psychologists, and social workers that can really focus on the preventive end. And it would put money towards building improvements as well. I think from my perspective, it was a disappointing outcome because I thought that there would be enough momentum to do not only preventive measures, but also responsive measures. And frankly, the preventive measures that the General Assembly put in place didn't even come close to the $40 million that Governor Cooper had asked for, and that was in our bill. And it's part of the reason that you see folks like Senator Nickel and myself pushing for more resources in schools to have nurses, school psychologists, and counselors. And so, to answer your question, I think we've laid out a blueprint as to what we can do to make our schools, protect our kids that are in school. It's just we haven't, because we don't have the political will with just General Assembly. Last thing I will say on this, as a parent and having gone to many Wake County walkout where I was asked to speak and I was honored to speak, is I think this is an issue that's really, really important to our kids and to young people. I think when I think about issues that are important to that generation, climate change, it's racial justice, and I think it's also around gun violence. And I think we saw that, and I think that this is something that this new generation is going to take up, and it's something that they expect us as elected officials to deliver on.
Thank you. Wiley.
I mean, I certainly agree with Jay, with Senator Chaudhry 100%. I've been with him for these speeches and these walkouts where, kids are demanding that we finally start moving legislation to prevent gun violence in schools. For me, it's an issue where I'm going to be voting on this every single time, like my kids could be next. The really horrible thing when you go and you talk to principals, though, is they tell you if someone is intent on doing it, there's no physical safety structure. There's nothing they can really do to keep a school safe, but we can in the legislature. I'm a Moms Demand Action gun sense candidate, and there are so many things we can do. And I just want to say it again, just so folks can truly understand, we can ban assault weapons. We can pass red flag laws. We can increase funding for nurses, psychologists, counselors. Those are things that are proven to reduce gun violence and keep our kids safe. And we've got to do it. And, I just, for the parents out there, I will just tell you, if Democrats are in the majority in the legislature, these are bills that we will bring to the floor and we will pass to keep our kids safe.
Thank you. So for question 3, we'll start with Wiley. And here's the question. In lieu of less revenue coming into the state, tough cuts may need to be made to the education budget. What are some of the first things you would look at to reduce costs and cut overhead?
That's just not what I'm going to Raleigh to do. I think we have to put public education first at the top of the list, and we have plenty of revenue to do it. We've lost close to $4 billion in Republican tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy, and that's money that we need to invest in public education. Businesses, when I talk to them, when I talk to chambers of commerce, they tell me that businesses want to move here to have world-class public education, and that's what we need to deliver. So, I'm not looking to cut, costs. I'm looking to make sure that we reach, the national average in spending per student. Right now we're number 40 in spending per pupil. We've got to do much better than that. So, we have plenty of revenue out there. It's not a revenue issue. It's a issue of political will to do it. And, my goal is to make sure that we reach the national average. And just on a personal level, when we talk about school funding, I'm an attorney, I have a law firm, and we had this wonderful legal assistant that we loved. Her husband was a teacher, and she left my law firm because he got another job in Arkansas making $15,000 more a year. So, when we're losing teachers, great teachers to states like Arkansas, we've got a real problem. If we want to recruit and retain quality educators, we need to pay them, and those are my priorities.
Thank you. Jay.
Yes. So I don't think you're gonna meet a member really of the current Wake County delegation that will agree with the assumption that we have to start with education cuts. I mean, look, I think we all need to acknowledge that we don't know what the revenue shortfalls are going to be given the pandemic and the impact that it has. But I think as a first principle, we're going to start with trying to protect the education budget. And so what does that mean? I mean, I think that means that we got to make sure that we continue to pay the teachers for pay them the salary that they deserve, and even look to increasing it. It means that we need to continue to make those investments now, in broadband and rural broadband, for example, because as I mentioned in my earlier comments, the pandemic has certainly exposed the inequalities that we have, particularly with broadband access. It means that we need to make sure that we're renovating school buildings that are collapsing. In many ways, I think a lot of these things that we want to do can also be a win-win, because when you look at school infrastructure, for example, it's also an opportunity to create jobs. But I think we start with the first principle that we protect the education budget, or we even try to invest and increase, and we put more resources towards that. Look, it is also part of the reason that Senator Nickel and I did not vote for a Republican budget that simply did not go far enough in giving teachers the pay that they deserved. And that was something that Governor Cooper fought very hard for. And I think that is something that we will continue to fight hard for, because it is such a priority for us.
Thank you. So we're already at closing statements. I think we can give the both of you 2 minutes for closing statements, and we'll start with the same order that was in question 3. So we'll start with Wiley.
I'm just glad to be here to answer questions. I would encourage, folks who are in my Senate district, if you have further questions, to follow up with me. I look at this as service to my district. I work for you. And, I think we just need to, we have a very important choice in this election. We know what the trajectory we're on as a state is under the current leadership in the Republicans in the General Assembly, and we are asking folks to give us a shot, to let us make those needed investments in public education. I'm somebody who supports one system of public education. That means a moratorium on charters, means freezing funding for vouchers, and in having Wake County be a place where we have world-class public schools. So we've got amazing teachers, we've got amazing folks involved in our schools, and we just need to support them as a state. And it's a simple question. Again, it's just, do we continue to be a place that is far below everywhere else in the South in terms of tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy, or do we roll back some of those taxes to make needed investments? I know we have the political will to do this as a state, and this just is frankly an election issue. So I would encourage folks that are watching this to decide, how you want to see our state growing and moving forward. North Carolina is a state where education is what makes our state, and especially the Triangle, move. We have great public universities. They provide great jobs, and we've got to invest in schools to make sure that we have a great system of public education. So I'm excited about what the next 4 years will bring with Governor Cooper, being reelected, and hopefully having a legislature that will support him and support his priorities for public education.
Thank you. Jay.
Well, thank you again, Lisa and Beth, for allowing us to spend some time and talking about these issues. I would say that I think that these are difficult and uncertain times with the pandemic, and I know it can be hard for parents to be at home with their children if they can do so. I know it's been challenging for us. But I would also say that sometimes it's through these crises that we see the best of human nature. We see so many parents that rally and come together to support our leadership in schools and support our teachers and support our students. And it's amazing. I mean, we live in an amazing community, and I think we live in an amazing county that really puts a premium on public education. And I think, if anything, it just reaffirms my values around public education and taking those values to the General Assembly. Hopefully, with the majority, where we're going to be able to work side by side with Governor Cooper to get the state on what I believe, and I think Senator Nickel believes, is on the right track. And so, the things that we talked about, making sure that the teachers get the pay raises that they deserve to get to the national average, that we invest in rural broadband and broadband here, even in Wake County, to make sure that teachers have the classroom resources, that we passed a bond package that gives our schools new classrooms like the one that my son's going to get when the pandemic ends, going back to Wiley Elementary School, that we address the fears that our kids have about not feeling safe after the Parkland shooting that we talked about. I mean, we can do all these things. We just need to have the right elected officials that share that same approach, to be a partner with Governor Cooper, so that we can return back to this incredible tradition of treasuring our public schools and our public education system that the state once had.
Thank you. Lisa?
Thank you. We just had Sam join the call. Sam, we will give you a chance to answer the questions. And Wiley and Jay, if you would like to sign off, because I know you're busy, you are more than welcome to. And then I'll give a closing statement at the end.
All right. Thank you so much for having us. And Jay, you've got a great name for that elementary school.
We're gonna have to get you to come and speak to it, Wiley.
I've actually been there, so yeah.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Bye, Jay. Bye, Wiley.
See you, Sam.
Hi, Sam. This is
Hi.
recorded and this will be uploaded to the Wake PTA YouTube tonight and shared on the Facebook and shared with the schools.
Wonderful. And thanks for having this. And I apologize for being late, but it's really Zoom call to Zoom call this time of year.
I completely understand. Yep, that was my day too. So Beth, I will turn it over to you if you would like to ask Sam the same questions. And then we'll make a note when we post this online that yours are at the end. So if you are a voter in your district, to make sure to go
Thank you.
to this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. So we'll just go question by question and give you the same amount of time that we gave to Jay and Wiley.
Okay.
The questions are right there in the chat box, but we'll read them officially as well. So the first question is, what is your assessment of how the state has handled the pandemic and distance learning?
Look, it's a very tough situation to be in. I have 3 children who are in Wake County Public Schools, and all of them are in the virtual academy. And, there was one day my 6-year-old was on her laptop, and I told the teachers, I said, thank you so much for what you do, because this is adding 1 to 2 hours at least, at a minimum, to your workday. Because I was so impressed when another one of my kids came downstairs with their laptop, and I could hear the teacher giving instructions on how to access lessons on an iPhone, on an iPad, on a laptop, on a MacBook. And I thought, my goodness, I mean, this is just adding so much more on top of all of the work that you all have to do anyway. I think, backing up a little bit, I think the state's response overall, aside from public education, has been good. I think that Governor Cooper and Secretary Cohen have followed the science. And I think that really helped our state get below that 5% infection rate threshold. And quite frankly, we were doing better than a lot of our neighboring states through the end of the summer. Now we're starting to tick back up. So I'm very curious to keep really a very close watch on the numbers and see what happens there. The virtual learning aspect, it's just tough. It's very tough. I mean, my kids are now slated to go back into school physically at the end of the month, except for our oldest, who is in middle school. So, we'll see what happens. I'm cautiously optimistic, but we do have we're seeing the COVID numbers increase. So I will be curious to see if we finish the school year. When I say school year, I mean through the end of December, in-person learning or back to virtual.
Thank you. Okay, so question 2. It's been a little over 2 years since the nation's worst high school shooting happened in Parkland. How would you assess the progress in making schools safe, and what more should be done?
I think there's a lot that can be done. I think that outside of the parameters of our public school system, we need to look at implementing red flag laws to make sure those people that are suffering some sort of a mental breakdown or mental episode are hopefully restricted from the access to guns, particularly semi-automatic weapons. I also think that we need to have a ban on semi-automatic weapons. I just don't see the need for that. While I'm still supportive of the Second Amendment, if you're doing this from a perspective of hunting or a perspective of sport, I just don't understand the need for sort of rapid fire ammunition. And I mean, I even grew up on a farm in a rural part of North Carolina. So I understand the need sometimes for firearms. I think there's a lot more we can be doing from a school safety perspective. I think we need to make sure that we have the proper amount of law enforcement presence within our schools. One thing that gives me a lot of comfort here in Holly Springs, which is where I live, is the fact that where most of our schools are located is also the police office. So it's wonderful to have that department right there beside all of the schools. I think it makes everybody feel a level of comfort and a level of safety, which is very positive. But I think that there's more we can do. And I think that if we flip the state Senate, you'll see more that we can do.
Thank you. And then just the final question.
Sure.
In lieu of less revenue coming into the state, tough cuts may need to be made to the education budget. What are some of the first things you would look at to reduce costs and cut overhead?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. So much has been cut from our public school budgets over the past 10 years, since 2010, 2011, that I'm not sure what else could be cut from an overhead perspective. I feel like our school system runs very lean and very mean, for lack of a better term. I think our teachers are doing a great job with what they have. I think our school support staff are doing a great job with what they have. And we're going to have to make some tough decisions budgetarily as a General Assembly here in North Carolina. I want to make sure that people understand that within the North Carolina Democratic Senate Caucus, our priority is absolutely the public school system. So whatever cuts we have to make budgetarily, we are going to do so with our public schools in mind, to make sure that we're not cutting those budgets as much as possible. I mean, at the end of the day, I am a business person. I've started several successful companies here in the Raleigh and Research Triangle area. And the reality is every dollar that we put into public schools, the UNC system or the community college system, those are dollars literally that go into economic development. And they help grow the workforce that we need for tomorrow, for the jobs of the future. So I think there are ways that we can look at the budget, assess the budget, and make sure we don't have to make any cuts to the public school budget, and hopefully even add to our public school budget to get our teachers and our per pupil expenditures at least to the national average. The one great advantage that we have as a state is the fact that the net migration into North Carolina exceeds that of people leaving North Carolina. That helps increase our tax base. And I think that's something that we can look at, make sure that we're not continuing to cut taxes for large out-of-state corporations and really focus on our public school system. I mean, when you look back at the late 90s and the early 2000s, we had an impeccable public school system, highly ranked. not only throughout the country, but even globally in some respects. So I would like to see us get back to that and make sure that our schools are fully funded.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's end with a 2-minute closing statement.
Sure. I really appreciate your time. Again, I'm sorry that I was late. I'm running from meeting to meeting today, and it's just that time of year. The last 2 to 3 weeks of the campaign cycle are very hectic. I grew up in Western North Carolina, so I'm a native North Carolinian, and I'm a byproduct of the North Carolina public school system. So I went to Etowah Elementary, I went to Rugby Middle School, West Henderson High School, and then graduated from Appalachian State University, where I was the first person in my family to graduate from a 4-year college or university. I'm very proud of that, but I also point to that now that I'm a successful business person. That was the spark. It was our public school system that gave me the tools necessary to be successful. And all I want, and the only reason I ran for office, is to make sure that every child and every person in North Carolina who seeks to better themselves through the public school system or through our public university system has the opportunity to do that. There is nothing more important than education. And it's just a pillar of our state. It's a pillar of our community, and it's the pillar of my campaign.
Thank you. Lisa?
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Wake County PTA Online Candidate Forum. We'll be hosting additional smaller forums for school board candidates next week. And all information will be posted on our social media and YouTube site. Advocacy is the heart of PTAs, and we are looking forward to continuing our efforts advocating for all children. Early voting begins Thursday, October 15th and runs through October 31st. If you want to request an absentee ballot, it must be received by October 27th. Election day is Tuesday, November 3rd, and the last day to register is tomorrow, Friday, October 9th. I also wanted to add that all candidates were invited to this forum, and we welcome the chance to speak to the opponents of the candidates you saw tonight, again, if they have time. Thank you.
Thank you.